I'm here with Will Golding, and I'm very pleased to get the opportunity to ask a few questions about Will and his passion for education. I've known him through Adult Learning Project and its association. I've always been very impressed by the enjoyment I see on Will's face when he's doing some community education. So, hello, Will.
Thanks very much.
Well, Will, can you tell me and us a little about your work?
Yes, I could tell you about some of my work. So at the moment, I'm working in community education, as it's known in Scotland. I work as an adult education tutor. I work as a youth worker. I work as community development worker with different projects. The boundaries are quite, grey, maybe. Some of the distinctions between some of the areas are more or less clear, and some of it's my paid work, some of it's voluntary, and within those you have a whole range of different roles. But the core of my practice is community education, which is a broad enough field with different traditions, but that's roughly where I'm working at the moment.
Great.
Yeah, just tell me what else you'd like to know. I thought I'd talk about.
Well, how did you get into education? That's a good broad question to start.
So, but I can't think of a particular moment, a spark. It's an iterative process, in time there's lots of different circumstances. Well,
or maybe, sorry, or maybe it might be helpful to think about what moments in education, your experience of education, that have inspired you. What?
Mm-hmm. So, as a student studying music and philosophy, there was a whole range of sort of involvement of students in those subjects, and the two subjects that kind of inspire a lot of passion, creativity, and commitment, but are also and could effectively be very powerful subjects. They've got quite significant content to them, but are very esoteric actually in many ways to lots of people. So I witnessed amongst my peers, two subjects that have the potential to inspire and for sort of critical analysis of society, to challenge and to offer new perspectives, becoming more and more excluded from the general populace and everyday lives. So it was more and more sort of annoying, basically, to see like such great potential being actually not utilized for the purposes of social justice, really, when the society is living in such huge inequalities, and then these type of things are not being best put to use, not for social change, not for any sort of useful knowledge, really, any challenging structures. So I moved to London and I was working as an academic support worker, so I would get to basically chum people along to all different kinds of lectures and see how they were giving support for their studies and what they were learning about. So it was a real thirst for finding out whole breadth of information, whole breadth of knowledge, and sort of critical discussion from subjects in psychology, law, criminology, sociology, PGCE, chemistry, I was studying maths, law, a whole load of stuff. And from a whole range of institutions. So we got to see ways that it was being delivered and how that was affecting the students I was supporting. And again, just emphasizing this thing I now know as the banking model of education, where that Paulo Freire talks about the banking model, where effectively information is delivered across the counter, from the banker to the customer to receive that, and that's really what a lot of the universities were delivering. And I could see it wasn't really being useful but there was so much interesting content there and just not being applied. So I was simultaneously involved in things like after school clubs and community art space projects with a few artists I knew in London, and trying to and discussing this and applying this and thinking about some of the practices of people like Joseph Beuys, sort of German artist, and how to critically engage art in society and in education, and started to put these things into practice. We ran something called the Treehouse Gallery, which is a sort of 3-month-long free school in Regent's Park, and we built 2 tree houses in a year and ran events there, free events every single day for 3 months. It's enormous. 70,000 people came or something over the whole time. It was enormous, and it was a completely voluntary project. There was no money passed hands at any point during that whole period, and that was a sort of an attempt, an experiment in trying to bridge gaps between people's passions, people's expertise, and sort of social purpose, and trying to reach a whole range of groups that were not able to access mainstream education. There was a lot of things that kind of went well, and there's a lot of things that we learned that went wrong there. And I suppose a lot of it was about how much is education just perpetuating inequalities? How much is it just providing even more education to the already, well-educated effectively, and how much is it really attempting to deal with and analyze structures and situations that affect people's everyday lives? So that as a situation gave me the inspiration to want to work, to maintain working within that area, but to reassert our practices to ensure that it was led by people's everyday experiences and stuff, whatever exactly that meant. And so to involve myself in organisations when I moved to Edinburgh, like the Workers' Education Association, the Adult Learning Project. That was one kind of trend that took me towards that. But also, I suppose it was the interaction I had. It's people that it's people you meet that inspire you to keep exploring how learning can be. How to make learning about arousing curiosity, challenging yourself, challenging society, and about progress and development and animation, and not just about information gathering and employability. So I could probably cite a few significant people. Friend Harry Sordy, who was an incredible outdoor educated storyteller, sort of Waldorf Steiner-based approaches about engaging the senses, engaging the whole body, engaging the spirit in everything that you do. So many walks and talks with him were key to my enthusiasm towards it. Plus a woman called Lizzie Hurst, who was an incredible artist who's based in Edinburgh. We sort of both discovered Patrick Geddes, who's the most amazing character from Edinburgh, sort of Gandhi of Edinburgh. I think he was friends with Tagore. He's friends with Rabindranath Tagore and maybe Gandhi, and their plan was to redesign Jerusalem, which is sort of the most outlandish and bold project that you could ever imagine. But I used to run these anarchist free schools in Edinburgh, helped redesign the old town to be a place that was conducive to social interaction amongst the classes, and promoted this interaction between place, work, and folk. And that learning springs from the interaction of those three key characteristics. We now know them probably as society, environment, and the economy. It's a simple triad, but he had a lot. The city saw as an organism, a living organism, and that's how we understand it. And the education is sort of like the key nutrition, key nourishment, and enrichment for that. But that grows from the land, it grows from the place, and it grows from the work that people do there, and the culture, the things that people do, and it feeds back into them as well. So there was always exciting, to be living and working and interacting in the same place that some of these ideas have been developed, and then meeting and speaking with Patrick Geddes' grandson, Colin Geddes, quite a bit, who lives in Loanhead, just outside Edinburgh. Some fascinating conversations about how to actualize some of that. So really, it was kind of some of that work, some of the work of Paulo Freire and sort of Marxist approach to critical theory, and applying that, some of these ideas, and then seeing workers like you at the other learning projects, Stan Reeves, Chuck Blair, people like that, that had found ways of doing that, and being enthused themselves, being passionate characters who were politicized, but who enjoyed their work, who had creative ideas, who weren't worn down by bureaucracy, and had obviously made this stuff work. They'd seen it work. So as I've gone, it's been more and more inspiring to learn about things that affect everyday lives, things that improve and change everyday experiences, and to encounter people that have faced all kinds of barriers, a whole host of barriers to learning. And as we know, inequality is the worst thing for society. If you look up the Wilkinson and Pickett type seminars, just show how dangerous it is for societies where inequalities is as large as they are in Britain. So meeting people that are most affected by these and seeing how many barriers they face and need to be overcome, it's definitely been a sort of inspiration to want to challenge the systems that have created those inequalities. It's just unbelievable that people have been put in those situations out of their hands. And education is it's not the lever for transformation of society, as Paulo Freire would say, but certainly is one to raise awareness and begin to actualize practice that sort of where you can live alternative solutions, even if it's just in the classroom or within a community group. So that's what kind of keeps me going. And,
it's fantastic. I like to hear about people's vision of what education is, because there's such broad perspectives.
How's it going?
One second. Well, lovely to bump into Ross there. We're sitting outside Hula in the grass market having a coffee, and Ross, a very interesting, creative friend, stopped for a conversation. Anyway, carry on with the interview.
Okay.
I'm interested to know what your experience of education was.
Yeah. So, as a student.
As a student, even outside, inside of formal spaces, outside of formal spaces, whatever comes to mind. I think these are the stories that I'm immediately interested in.
Yeah, right. Well, formally, I went through the same route as majority of people go through in primary school, secondary school, but I did grow up in Buckinghamshire, which still has a grammar school system, which is, the roots of inequality. You take a test at the age of 12 and immediately you get separated into schools depending on how well you do. Incredibly bad system for society. So that's where I kind of did my formal learning in that institution, and and it's an institution with some fantastic teachers and some interesting courses, amazing people in, but also very exam focused, and that's its aim and objective really. And if you don't go into university, then you're not very successful. Actually, that's the sort of route that would take. So the seeds of change in that were sort of sowed when I met someone who introduced me to sort of what I think the course was critical thinking or something like that that we sort of had to do, and that was the beginnings of looking at philosophy and the beginnings of some sort of discourse analysis. In a very sort of simple way in some ways, just like beginning to question just things like your everyday media, and to think what are the messages, what's behind that, and who has power and stuff. And so that was the beginnings of like kind of a sort of seeds of change for me. And then a lot of my learning in the next year was really self-led amongst myself, amongst friends. And I became quite interested and took it into uni and sort of, like autonomous self-led groups, self-led study groups, self-led kind of events, a bit like the sort of ragged stuff. It's a series, I can't think of the name of them now, there's a series of talks they used to put on in London that I used to go to in the pub. It's similar types of things, a kind of whole range of content, but it would be talking about, really interesting topics that were, things that were happening, like what does Second Life, mean? What does people existing on Second Life sort of mean for our everyday existence now? It's just like, and loads of other stuff. As a student at university, as I said, there was this culture, there was a general culture of university of like apathy, really. It's a sort of strong culture of apathy which pervades university, which is just unbelievable, really. What a lot of people see as the height of someone's sort of academic learning gets sort of often diminished to resistance to wanting to seem involved in it somehow. So
I'm curious, have you got any ideas on why that apathy or resistance comes about? It's interesting as to you.
Let's think.
Not to put you on the spot. It's just.
You could potentially say the culture of silence has some effect on that. With the culture of silence that's schooled into us that being too much of an active participant, speaking up too much in class, always being the one that's like got that hand up or kind of saying something or challenging what's being said is not always that supported often, so and that you're wrong. If you're told you're wrong, you don't often stand up to sort of say something again, second time. And if you're sort of taught something directly from the book or from the board, then you're told to listen and internalize it and to not sort of debate and question it. And I think majority of people, probably myself included, take that forward to university. So to be the person that's sort of really active in that process, it's not like a done thing. Probably also because universities, I guess people approach it in different ways. It's got a slightly different function, maybe, than just sort of academic learning, and maybe also that the actual courses themselves are not always, they remain within academia many of the times, and so don't relate themselves to practical knowledge. They don't relate themselves to people's experiences who are on the course, or how so actually people continue on with their lives, things that are affecting them, and that's, wealth, income, family, health, anything like that, really, ability, disability, poverty, blah, blah, blah. And so I think a lot of people, do see it as a distance from them. So they're like, oh, I have to do this. But really my main interest is, what's happening with my life or in my family's or my community's life. So without, so there's maybe not the same passion for involvement. And so I think there's a few factors in there. But it's definitely a pervasive culture of apathy sometimes. So I would have to, so I kind of do my courses and I'd sort of sneak along to other lectures and stuff, and have to, not talk about that too much, really. Particularly sort of quite a lot of extra music groups, basically, some music classes, extra music tutorials, continuing to learn, improve my singing, improve my percussion playing, improve my harmony practice and ethnomusicology and the sort of traditional sort of dances from different cultures and these sorts of things that really you wouldn't want to admit too much that was what you were doing in your spare time. Eastern philosophy class on a Tuesday morning. It's not it's not a cool thing to do, man. So I was really enthused by university in the way that there was so much potential for learning there, but at the same time, just so much lack of application of that. It became quite frustrating after a while. Since then, my own experiences of learning, of being is, for example, joining the Adult Learning Project as someone moving to Scotland, joining a group of Scotland for newcomers is a fantastic project. It still runs today. This thing's been running for maybe 8-9 years now, and it's quite simple. It welcomes in newcomers to Scotland by providing a free meal and then a dialogical discussion basically about a whole range of topics, comparing Edinburgh's culture to your culture, famous buildings, famous people, famous traditions, common dance, common music, whatever. So you learn about Edinburgh, Scotland's culture while sharing your own and comparing them. And it's and it was a fantastic thing, and it welcomes me into Edinburgh and to the Adult Learning Project, and it felt for me certainly a way to get involved. Another significant moment would be a tutor that I had, a music tutor that I had that just sort of an 86-year-old Welsh miner who kind of took me under his wing and it's just sort of forced me to become better at singing and guitar performance, and just pushed, but with such a supportive and expressive manner. Could never, it's the kind of person you could never, you wish to replicate that sort of attitude. You could never thank enough for them.
I always like to think of these moments, even the 5 minutes with some people 20 years later has flowered into an interest and an intrigue and the ability to try and learn something, get involved and participate. So, I like thinking of the people, where my learning is situated. And thinking about that in terms of temporality and time. Where is it situated in time? I remember one person in my childhood, I was bawling my eyes out. And somebody just took the moment to buy me a colouring book. And I was absolutely shocked by the generosity. I didn't understand it. But the time they spent, they chose to give me the resources and sit down and show me how to colour it. And that flowered into I think, lots of thinking about my place in society, what my relationship with others is, but also that warm feeling when I do art.
Mm-hmm.
Their presence is with me.
Fantastic, yes. Yeah. Amazing. So there you were talking about where someone has shown their commitment to assisting you as well and in participating. But I suppose what were you most impressed by? Their willingness to put time and creative thought into how to support you.
Yeah, they valued me. They shared company with me. They believed in me. They knew that I could do it. They created a situation that enabled me to do it. And then they walked. I can't even remember their name, but it was only 5 minutes. And yeah, it's a moment. I couldn't put at the time, if you had asked me to measure the outcome, well, it would take me 20 years to get to it. And it's still flowering. It's still getting bigger. It's still more meaningful each day. So,
and have you told this story to lots of people?
I try to tell people about these moments which have the transformative learning.
Have you told this story before? This particular?
Yes, I've told this one. The more I think, my life is absolutely filled with events.
The significance, is telling of the story or remembering and reflecting on that experience. I think that's it's key. That's the key point to community education, is that your experiences are the source of your own learning. And so that's a really interesting story. It's a really interesting reflection you've had on it. And that's the source where you can find, self-understanding and critical sort of understanding as well. And that, I think for lots of people, can be incredibly revealing, very powerful, and certainly people that have talked about being involved in popular education, and for example, having to say, draw or represent a good community and a bad community, doing that with a group and representing and presenting and discussing it, and then realizing how much of what they value and want they've been prevented from being able to realize for both personal and sort of economic reasons. And, just really finding that difficult and really revealing to swallow. Yeah, that's an interesting story.
I think that's part of what I'm trying to do in the journey, which is my involvement with Ragged University, is build up a mosaic of pictures. That's one of an endless number of stories that part of the conception of what education is or learning. There's always a different set of baggage to different sets of words. So I figured just be eclectic and over time. And I'm interested in what's not already in the discourse. And how we can maybe work towards opening the discussion about valuing this in a time when Well, I've heard many times people say, well, if it doesn't cost people something financially, people don't take it seriously. Now, I contest this perspective. It's not only the financed world which is meaningful, but it is only the financed world that we can measure by money. So, yeah, I'm happy to go on record. I'm going to be talking about my dyslexia, right? So, not that I didn't learn. I've been learning a lot. And talking with people like yourself and with groups and organizations, with academics, professionals, I'm realizing, I've got a keen interest in what's happening outside of those formal contexts, because I think they're very important.
Mm. It's interesting that, say, 6 years ago, if you talk about free, voluntary, autonomous education, free, voluntary, self-led educational events, that sort of thing, that would have been in some ways a radical alternative to mainstream delivery of education, and how it's offered and how people engage with it. A sort of almost an anarchist route. Now, that's part of the mainstream governmental discourse. Now, in some ways, free schools, good society, co-production, community empowerment, things have become, those actions have become part of the government's solution to its own economic cuts and conservative sort of models. So I think it's important for us, I guess, in our practice, is to work out and distinguish how our actions, volunteers, or our actions as providing free adult education or free community education is distinct. What makes it distinct from the free schools? What makes it distinct, from big society, which is replacing essential societal services, which, as a state, we have built up over time to provide, or the state has built up provision for. So I think that's an important distinction we have to kind of start to clarify is what are we and what are we not, perhaps. And
you stimulated me to look up the economics, or the history of economics of that word charity. And it's quite revealing. So I was looking at the books. Pretty much all universities are charities, of course, including Edinburgh University. Yeah. We can look up the accounts online by going to Oscar. So I believe there's, according to the Oscar accounts, there's £38 million surplus in University of Edinburgh. And of course, all of that, in the most conservative way of expressing it, that £38 million is there to be spent on charitable purposes. It's according to the legal entity. So let's burrow down into this sense of what charity is and it's not. And of course, you've got a distinct view of what education is. It's got an important role in society. So how do we conceive of that? How do we label that in society? How do we support that functionality? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
how do we support that functionality?
For example, I've been looking also at a concept of merit goods in economics. Why do we have public art? Well, it's actually very important for a society to have free access to art, and things of beauty, things that make us think. Of course, it's just the process of building up pictures. I think you've got very interesting things to say.
I mean, I think it is tied to politics, intimately tied to politics. I think education is a form of practice of democracy. In some ways, what we want to strive for. You know, the experience of dialogue, meaning the dialogos of, more than one coming to understand meaning together. So there's sort of a shared understanding of meaning from both what are the words you're using, what's the experience you're talking about with the words you're saying. So it's sort of, so coming to a shared understanding rather than a debate. It's, one argument defeats the other. So even the experience of dialogue is a democratic practice itself. And the way that education can be run, who gets the choices over what curriculum is developed and delivered, who has the choices over what's that for, what's the purposes of that. I think that's in some ways what makes a distinction between, say, free schools that are run by a strong parents committee that have extra time, but they decide what all the pupils get to learn, and a community education program, which is effectively about the learners having control and it being applied to their own lives to try to change their circumstances for the better. And in terms of charity, I think charities it's like it's a necessary evil in modern Britain anyway, modern Scotland, and it wouldn't be something to strive towards. And I think charity, it's that which society is not provided, and so you have to rely on the willingness of charitable efforts. It should be built into sort of a well-functioning society, and that's why I think it is so tied to democracy and politics. If there's, as I was mentioning earlier, studies that would show that inequalities cost, in financial terms, a huge amount of money. I think I was reading yesterday, one homeless adult in Scotland costs the state £24,000 a year, which is on average. And so that's an economic cost, and that's ignoring all the social costs, all the sort of, the impact that might have, and has all kinds of different impacts, obviously, as you might know, and the inequalities where stress is increased. So, we don't have as much as them, we are not as good as them, we don't have as much opportunities, we don't have as much free time as them. Where differences exist, there is a huge amount of health inequalities, mental health illness, stress, and then also lack of access to the same amount of services and opportunities as others, blah, blah, blah. It's incredibly bad for society as a whole, and democracy, I suppose, is one form of being sure that the voices and the experiences of people who are suffering the most from whatever system's in place have some representation or say in the control of that. And if that was fully active, then maybe a fully functioning society might actually save money, and more people would be healthy. Healthy and wealthy, basically, would be, So I suppose it involves the political will to recognize that actually participative democracy and better equality is better for society than the models we've got. And education is a sort of a key instrument in achieving that. And if that was recognized, then more investment was put into lifelong education, lifelong learning, adult education, youth work that's about building solidarity, about building mutuality, about arousing curiosity, not just delivering sports programs or employability programs without any critical. I mean, employability is absolutely essential as well. People need to get into work, but without any sort of critical function or aspirational hope within that, then it doesn't challenge the systems in which it comes. So I think the way to think, you were saying about how do we support the functionality more education, I think we would have to be trying to reassert this kind of thing, these values, and reassert the values of education, the social values, sort of stuff that New Economics Foundation would give us some insights into. Maybe something like Thomas Piketty might show us the opposite of what's possible.
He's certainly brought together an incredible book on aggregated data, which helps inform our arguments. I mean, I'd like to touch on, so over the years, I've noticed that you're of course involved in adult learning project, and that this has a connection with Paulo Freire, and I think I'm terrible at pronouncing.
People call him it, whatever, all sorts of names.
And of course, he terms it problem-based learning.
So problem posing, yeah.
Problem-posing learning, and you've been involved in a co-investigation group.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, for those who don't know about problem-posing education, these approaches of engaging people in thinking, tell. Yeah.
Problem posing, yes, it's what it says on the tin is asking people to pose problems and to ask questions rather than giving solutions. And that certainly to begin with, and that is to move beyond situational experiences. It's to move beyond just, like, for example, there are no jobs available. It must be all the foreigners stealing them. So that's an experience that you'll see, that you might, or people might, might happen, and saying, well, let's pose the problem and let's investigate that problem. Let's not try to think immediately of the solution. Get rid of the migrants, get rid of the foreigners or something. So it's about it's trying to analyze the problems. That's the key function. That's the key function of co-investigation. It's a piece of community research, just like any other sort of action research. You go around and you interview and do focus groups with various people living within a particular community about living in their community. But significantly, and it's meant to be involving those people as researchers. They are co-investigators of their community and their lives. Significantly is the second stage in that process, which is representing those problems in codes, and the codes generally in Freire's work are images, now that learning project as well, and because it's static representation which can then be analysed, it's open to interpretation, and can have a kind of whole rich set of meanings. And it's really trying to get to how people interpret it rather than what the code wants to tell you, sort of thing. So it might be an image of a particular issue or problem came up in a community, but a code could be all sorts of other things. And there's someone who's just done a study on what other codes could be in sort of in 21st century. But videos, often drama, forum, theatre, song. A code could be a headline in a newspaper. A code could be any representation of a sort of complex of ideas and issues and problems. But significantly with co-investigation, you go back to the people that we've been speaking with these representations and ask them to reanalyze those situations. So Jane Jones' community work we wrote about her practical application of Paulo Freire's work in Pilton in Edinburgh. She talks about simply the why method. You just ask why. So
I like it already.
and it's very Socratic, right? And so this is what's going on. Why? This is there's not enough jobs. Why is there not enough jobs? Everyone's taking our jobs. Why? Because they didn't have any jobs in where they come from, in Spain, say, 50% poverty or whatever. Why is that? There is no money in the economy there to provide growth, economic growth. Why is that? Well, I suppose the money comes from investment of international banks, and they don't have any money. Why is that? Well, I suppose a lot of it was invested in hedge funds, which sort of crashed. Well, why is that? Well, speculative loans and lending and investment was allowed to go ahead without any regulation. Well, why is that? Because the IMF effectively have total control without sort of any sort of democratic involvement from the EU, from any national governments, and it seems to sort of be privileged as the almighty sort of controller of our nations. Well, why is that? Well, fuck. Exactly. Why the hell is that the case? And so, the why method, that's sort of the approach to that. So problem posing, is about that. It's about asking people to analyse their own situations, and that is the educator. Or looking at their own experiences. Why did that happen? Why was that good? Why was that bad? And so, and it's just saying that you have the roots, you have the answers in your head, you have the answers in your own experiences, you have the answers in your own emotions, and what it felt like, what it was like to do these things, and what it feels like to be in these places. And you are the experts of your own lives. A bit like Ross was saying, it's about how to become active agent, how to become an active, dynamic agent in your interaction. And if you can analyse why something has happened, then you probably know what should be done to change it. So it's about this kind of democratic control and not being paternal, not being patriarchal, not saying we know what your problems are, we know how to solve them. And that, I suppose, is one of the key concepts behind that problem posing stuff.
Oh, fantastic! It makes so much sense to me. In my own life, this is how I've learned on my journey. I wanted to understand what was in my cereals in the morning. Looked at these funny chemical names on the side. Looked up a dictionary and found that riboflavins, vitamin B2. I said, well, what? And I had to get another book. So my love of books has been sort of another book methodology. I'll take that why example, why methodology of learning with me is very powerful, because I adore children this way. Why is that? Now we can find ways of stopping that, trying to stop the child asking the next why. But what's a real pleasure is when you give it a real go, and kids always bowl me over as to the sometimes amazing clarity of vision they have. And we forget that not so long ago they were part of a really coarse reality. Ducking and running under looms and down coal mines, in small seams. And we're in danger of forgetting that children are highly intelligent beings.
We often dismiss probably what OCs don't get is the most critically engaged and potentially radical members of our society, which are people between sort of 16 and 21. By the age of 16, you've probably experienced, at least, by maybe 19, you've experienced most significant experiences in people's lives. Love, death, loss, excitement, curiosity, pain, and lots of sort of general, emotional experiences, and your critical faculties are sort of developed, but you're very aware of other possibilities. You can envisage, sort of countercultural movements afresh, and and have not ever been consumed within any bureaucracy or technocracy, not taken control of, not ground down by sort of any state functions. Theodore Roszak talks about this, and Theodore Roszak, who wrote about sort of counterculture in America in the 70s, and the sort of the need to continue to engage with that kind of group of people as well, because that is a visionaries for future potentials that people just can't yet imagine, and it'd be nice to maintain that sense of curiosity and criticalness throughout your life. I think there's a quote from Foucault from something recently, which is about that. Put it on me, but yeah, about that need to just maintain criticalness. What I was going to say while I'm looking this up is the why method. I think is really good as well, but obviously sometimes to just ask why to someone, why did that happen, then people can feel quite threatened. Like, is it you asking me why something happened? And sometimes what we're trying to do through the co-investigation, and often in our type groups and community, is go with a sort of 4-stage process which builds up to that. It's descriptive, and it's start with what. Describe the situation. Describe what you talk. Your example of the person that gave you the colouring book. It's an easy way in is to say, well, what happened? Describe to me, what was the person? What was the situation? What's the colouring book like? Why were you? Where were you? When was this? Blah blah blah. And that's easy because that's something you can say without any need for judgment. And then, how did you feel? So, what were your emotions? As you said, you felt very sad, and suddenly you sort of felt this kind of confusion as to their generosity and what did this mean and everything. And then why? Then you move on to sort of analyse, well, why was that? Had you never experienced that generosity before, perhaps? Or, was this a moment where you suddenly recognised empathy for the first time, or whatever it was? And then finally moving on to action. What do we do? What can change because of it? What have I learned because of that? I find that's a very useful sort of interesting methodology.
Excellent, yeah. It, like I say, it makes a lot of sense to me. It's very tangible, both on if we're thinking about the theory, how it's working, but about the actualities, the practical experience of these moments. A nice jump to.
Yeah. It is fun. Yeah, this is well, I'll just take an example of it. Orla sent me this quote recently. The necessity of reform mustn't be allowed to become a form of blackmail serving to limit, reduce, or halt the exercise of criticism. Under no circumstances should one pay attention to those who tell one, don't criticise since you're not capable of carrying out a reform. That's ministerial cabinet talk. Critique doesn't have to be the premise of a deduction that concludes, well, this then is what needs to be done. It should be an instrument for those who fight, those who resist and refuse what is. Its use should be in processes of conflict and confrontation, essays and refusal. It doesn't have to lay down the law for the law. It isn't a stage in the programming. It is a challenge directed to what is. And a lot of that, I think is key to what's sort of the role of ComEd in some ways. It's not, feeds in, it sits in between people and policy. It's both controlled by policy and it cannot claim to do that much. It's an instrument of the state in many ways, or it's an instrument of charity which gets its money either via the state or via philanthropy. So it's controlled by the outcomes it has to deliver. But at the same time, it's allowed to work with people and their own issues. So it can sit in between, tries to negotiate that, and then tries to go back and agitate policy a wee bit. But it's never going to be the thing that changes society. It's not in a political position of power. I don't see that as its role. I mean, I may want to do that outside of my practice, but that's not.
I heard an interesting quote of Basil Bernstein, which is, education cannot compensate for society.
Great.
So this is so Basil Bernstein. Yeah, so in this area of thinking, I suppose I'm interested to know of your experience of bureaucracy and administration in your week-to-week, year-to-year existence. Have you found that bureaucracies have facilitated your work, or how have you encountered bureaucracies and administrations?
How have I encountered?
Or if you've got a better question,
I think it's a good point. I know it's something that you've thought about a lot. Your own sort of opinions on.
Well, that's just me something rubbish.
I mean, they can work for you. I think they can both absolutely crush potential people and passion, but they can also be enablers. And I've experienced long, detailed, difficult situations, either in massive groups that, because they have not developed any sort of bureaucratic structures, maybe, or mechanisms of working, or as an individual without the support to maybe do something that I need more resources, support for. And so then I've experienced, say, working within the council, or working with a larger organisation, where all of that is available to you. And if you just follow a few procedures, tick a few boxes, you actually have a huge amount more available to you. If you can, if you're given the agency within. It really depends on the role of your manager and how well you can work with bureaucracy. It seems. But I think it is an incredible threat to community education. We'll talk about the de-skilling of community workers, becoming bureaucrats, becoming managers, and losing their role as educators, losing their direct contact with groups, losing their role of being good problem posers, losing their role as being creative thinkers, and becoming better and better at form filling. And it is a major threat because it happens slowly. It is a subtle and all pervasive thing which just sneaks up on you, sort of, and it's just there, and people just don't realise that maybe it's there. It's there as a mechanism. It's there as the mechanism to allow things to work better, not as something to get in the way. You have to look above and beyond it sometimes.
I think it's always an interesting question to ask people because, for example, I knew somebody who's very, very interested in systems thinking and instilled in me this sense of need for a list and writing down things. It's very important. We can only hold so many things in memory. And also, if we're to communicate across groups, paper is a very good way of communicating across space and across time.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
Samuel Pepys revolutionized the whole of our culture by simply helping organize by paper. So I'm interested to hear people's accounts of how administrative systems, how paperwork have, been helpful, been unhelpful.
Well, if you to increase democracy and sustainability of a project, I think it is essential. for example, on a committee or a tutor or someone who's sort of in a role of responsibility, they develop a series of practices, whatever that is. They develop a better way of doing something, a better way of doing the accounts, a better way of running the meetings, a better way of developing resources or running a program. Now, if they keep that to themselves because they can't bother to write it down, or whatever, or don't make a very sort of clear way of passing on to someone else, then that's great that they've done that, but it doesn't provide anything to the continuation of that organization. It's if that can be improved and made accessible, then that hopefully strengthens the democracy of the organization. It means the idea would be that anyone should be able to then pick up that role and work from the improvements that have been made, and it should make things easier in some ways. That's obviously, well, not obviously, but the council in some ways has gone so far down that route that there are some distances which, if you have a problem, there's like a form you can fill in for everything, effectively, and sometimes maybe who knows when that gets acted upon. But what it does mean is that in the rise of third sector organisation charities, a lot of people who are just, effectively keen, passionate volunteers will spend their time working out how to do a risk assessment, spend 3 hours having to do a risk assessment, or 3 hours, learning about how to use banks' payment systems for assessing tutor, or like how VAT works. Now, these are all important things, but that's why you have a public sector in the council that has developed departments, bureaucratic structures for people to deal with these things, so that you are freed up to deal with your particular responsibility. So, and it's important to have interaction, so people aren't stuck in their specialised silos. But I think that's where there is a benefit of it, is where people get sucked in to developing bureaucracy when it actually already exists elsewhere. It's even worse. It's sort of like the dilution of bureaucracy amongst all types of community groups. But where possible, I try to avoid introducing it, into practices where it's not necessary, because it does, in some ways, devalue the human interaction, devalue the flexibility, the trust, the faith, and the sort of fluidness of human relationships, and on a project or involved in anything, and that these things can change, and actually having something that's too strict can confine rather than enable, sort of thing.
I'd like to know. Well, I'm conscious of, you're busy, and thanks for giving us time. I'd like to know what you'd like other people to understand about what you do.
If you ask someone, probably from outside Scotland, what's community education? Well, I work in community education, probably think, oh, so do you get paid for that? That'd be a fun. Oh, that's nice. That's a nice thing. Feel rewarding. I think that's a common experience, that people have, and it's not meant to be a charitable approach. It's not about, for me, it's certainly not about trying to help the underprivileged or something become better people. I suppose effectively about utilizing education to build solidarity. It's about utilizing education to challenge any sort of structures, any sort of systems, any sort of bureaucracy, any individuals as well, that have imposed, I suppose, situations, circumstances on people that have limited their ability to have lead a good, healthy, enjoyable life. I suppose for me, it's about maintaining curiosity throughout your life, maintaining criticalness, being willing to constantly sort of readjust, re-challenge, and also always involve your emotions in what you're learning. Always relate it back to reality. Always relate it back to how it makes you feel, how it makes others people feel. That education learning is holistic, and if it can inspire you, if it can make you passionate, then it gives you a sense of meaning and excitement about doing it. And if you feel confident in something, if you feel like you understand or know something, it creates such a high level of confidence that, if you become an active agent in your own life, determining some of your own circumstances, to not constantly feel like you're under the control of someone else, a landlord, a social worker, a teacher, a doctor, a politician. If you feel that you have control over that and you can both stand up to them, stand up to others, but also not just internalize messages that you receive, and then I think really that it gives you some much, much better sense of sort of well-being maybe in your life, and hopefully creates a sort of better society where people feel they want to support and cooperate and challenge, injustice, and do so happily, maybe. Yeah, it's a challenge, I think. And it's a consistent challenge. None of these things will ever, I don't think community education is the answer to the problem. It certainly stands somewhere within that, and it's attempting at one level to engage those issues, and we need to act outside of that as well. It's important to claim that it can't do that much more, and it's amazing to be able to work within a field that contains politics that you want to practice as well, to meet incredible people that along the way that are always learning. And also I want to find out about what I want people to know about, want people to understand, that by learning we live. Patrick Geddes, by learning we live. That's what keeps us going.
That's lovely. By learning we live.
Very abstract, but yeah. It's just written on the. It's just written up there. If you were to walk up the steps, just above, along from Hammams to Riddle's Court, you walk through the courtyard there, just above the whatever it is, one of the alleyways going to Riddle's Court. You'll see it just on engraved in the stone up there.
I shamefully don't know enough about Geddes and the amazing work. I know that he was linked to Rabindranath Tagore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I'm just learning about Tagore. So
okay, really great, fascinating character as well.
I appreciate that internationalist perspective. I heard the expression from somebody, Susan Brown, who teaches global citizenship. That we're actually living global lives. We cannot afford to imagine ourselves out of being connected. Very, very influential. So.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Almost nowhere is now beyond the realms of connectivity in the world. The idea of the internet becoming human right is not far off. Yeah? Access to the internet being as important as access to water. Yeah. People. It's great.
I'm always wary about what's your favourite and what's your most questions, but what do you enjoy most, or what do you enjoy about what you do? I like this as a question to finish on. So what brings that smile when you've been doing what you do, which is complex, it's holistic, it's reflective, dialogical. So.
When you kindle that flame, or when you see that candle is lit, or then it never goes out. If you're involved in a project that a group, an action that inspires someone to become involved themselves, to lead on that project themselves, or that thing, and to sort of begin to analyze and understand their own circumstances. And they become active in that. That's there for the rest of their lives, Once you've tasted what that is like. So it's incredible to see that. People that maybe potentially felt for their whole life very, unconfident in their own opinions or ability, suddenly realize what potential they have, how to utilize that, how to challenge structures that stop that is fantastic. Also, when people work together, it's very difficult to sort of keep maintaining something you might feel strongly about, unless suddenly others start to connect with you and support you in that, and together, democratically, as a community, you do something. I mean, that's certainly anything that I've tried to do that's not maintaining momentum, I've slowly become less and less interested. And the more and more others are enthusiastic, committed, and involved, the more I get enthusiastic, committed, and involved. Something, it's a cumulative thing. Community is something we have to work at. Both sort of, it's just sort of a never-ending active organism. And the more I think that's built, the more I feel part of the community. I guess I enjoy it challenging my identity. I enjoy being introduced to different people's lives experiences. Constantly reminded how different people's lives are. What incredible wisdom people have had. Like this 5-minute example that you talked about. And community education, you are lucky enough to be exposed to such a range of people and groups, communities, and how they are creatively engaging in the world. It's like, I just wish I had more time to write about it, reflect on it. You do experience such funny things and such amazing things as well. So, and to feel like, I suppose, you're working within something that begins to, attempts to live out some of the things you'd like to see in a better society. Sort of ways you'd like to see society organised, like the way you'd like to see education organised on a much bigger scale. And to receive solidarity from other colleagues. That's to feel part of a community of practice that maybe you respect, you look up to, and you also sort of share politics and interests with.
Fantastic. Well, Will Golden, really appreciate you having this conversation and coffee. I really enjoyed it. So, cheers.